G'day people and welcome back to another episode of AFL Fantasy Chats with Heff and Checkers. Round one has just wrapped up. Today we're going to go through our scores, a few different pods that we liked from the weekend, a few hot takes, and what our trade plans are going to be for this week. We're recording a little bit later this week because Checkers, you got stuck in Tasmania earlier in the week. Tell us all about that.
Yeah, a little bit of a disaster week. The fantasy went well, and then went to Tassie to see the new mascot that they launched.
Yep.
Which has been hot on socials over the week. And then as we're leaving Tasmania, turns out they have a 10 p.m. curfew, an early bedtime at the airport. And one of the planes got delayed, and we didn't get out and sort of got trapped in Tasmania, and everything just hit the fan and left our camera there. We had to find accommodation at 11 p.m. at night. Had to find a new flight home the next day. And, my first experience with Tasmanian football was an interesting one. So hopefully if I go there to watch a game in 2028, it's a little bit better. But it was an interesting setup, and we missed our potty record. Yeah,
it's all right. We're going to get it done today, which is probably more relevant. We've got some ins and outs and stuff like that. And all the news that's come out during the week, we can kind of use that to influence our decisions and our discussions today. So it's not all bad. The podcast is still getting out, so it's all good. Why don't we start off? Tell us how you went on the weekend. I don't know if you want to talk about AFL Fantasy and Supercoach. How'd you go on those?
Yeah, Fantasy was a good start to the year. I'm sitting ranked 2,587. I've got it written down in front of me, which was probably one of the highest starts I've ever had. I remember the year that I snagged a hat, I probably started ranked 10,000. It's just going to be a game of keeping it that way. I know the first week everyone's team is pretty much the same. And looking around, I was messaging Louis, and we looked at each other's teams, and we had one player different, and we were about 10,000 rankings different. So, it's interesting how that works in the first week. So, Supercoach, my first year sort of getting back into it. I haven't played it since about high school. So, I'm ranked 40,000 in that, probably a bit more truer, the ranking. But, yeah, what about yourself?
I was close to you in AFL Fantasy, 2,119. So what's that, about 40 points off of you? Less than 40 points off you there. So, 7,664 is my rank. And in all honesty, that's I'm wrapped with that, because usually I start around the 20,000 mark is where I usually start off. I felt like I went a bit more unique than some people this year, and a lot more mid-prices and less primos and stuff like that, and it kind of pulled off for me. But yeah, so to be in the top 10,000 after week one, when I usually finish in the top 2,000 and never start that high, I'm pretty happy with that. And from the Supercoach point of view, I got 2,179, ranked 12,649. They're messaging Geordie DeSena and Louis, as you mentioned before. After that, I think we were all within 10 points of each other. So I think we had like one player difference each or something like that. So
yeah, it's funny to see, click on the teams. We were having a good laugh clicking on the top 10 ranked teams in each comp, but just laughing at some of the selections. Like, how have they pulled this off? But it's the first week, and the most important part of the year is the trades, I guess, not the team you start with. So
yeah,
you could just be picking the wrong captain or picking the wrong rookie, and it changes your 20,000 ranks.
I think the
which
thing
is
is
easy
as well,
fix this week.
I think the thing is as well, like a lot of the good players pick similar players because they are genuinely the best decision at the start of the year. And if a couple of those don't go to plan, let's put Perryman out there or something like that, the person who's gone more random and unique will, probably score better. But that doesn't mean that's the best long-term pick over 24 rounds. You know what I mean? So like that's how like a few discrepancies can happen in round one. But you just got to stick with your plans, trust your gut, and you've picked your players for a reason. And, over 24 rounds, hopefully you can kind of prevail and show those other people's wrong. But yeah.
Trust the process. That's what the footy coach always says of footy training.
Correct.
Trust the process.
Isn't the footy coach you, mate?
I'm more talking about the ones coach. Not that I'm trying to strive into trust in the process of that team. I don't think I'll be getting a gig there, but the trust the process is the footy analogy you always hear on the track.
All right.
When they're making you try to do an extra 2K or an extra run, and you're like, I'm not doing this.
Trust the process, Checkers. Trust the process. Anyways, who was your pod of the week? So it doesn't have to be someone in your team, just a kind of point of difference player that you either started with that you're really happy with, or someone that you wish you'd started with, that you would have thought would be a good selection.
Numero uno, I want to thank you for giving us Tom Liberatore last week on the pod. That was a great call. I was running Sam Doherty and then got the news late on Thursday he's going to be the sub. And I was like, geez, this is you hate to be making late changes on a Thursday afternoon and having to scroll around your research and sort of. I was pretty happy with my team Thursday morning, Thursday night. I was freaking out, going, who am I going to pick? And then Heff said Libba. I'm going to go with Libba. So that rolled out all right, and he played well against the Kangas, and I think he'll go even better this week. He was just a consistent game, and yeah, looks like he's going to be a good start to the season.
Yeah, more than happy with the Libba call from my perspective. It's just the only thing is, I went Libba over Rosie. So I had Rosie in my team all season. And my thinking was, I felt like Port were going to struggle against Collingwood. He had that toe issue the week before, so he was limping around at training and stuff like that. And I was thinking, 90% of the competition is going to start with Rosie. I'll pivot, do something different, and go with Libba. And Libba scored 108. It was fine, but I think Rosie scored a little bit more. Maybe it was 112, 115 or something like that. A little bit more. But now I look at Port's run, and Rosie is going to go absolute ham, I think, over the next 6 weeks. So as much as I'm happy with the score from round one, just the pivot I did probably wasn't the best selection, that's all.
The other one that was in my team was just Tom Power. He had he was only 3.9% owned, and he had 19 disposals to half time. So I was sitting at the MCG at the Port Adelaide Collingwood game, which wasn't a pretty game to watch, but it was pretty opening my app and refreshing and seeing Tom Power had another 4 disposals, another 5 disposals. So he was, yeah, everyone sort of tipped it a little bit on Twitter and said he was going to go pretty good this year and play midfield. He had 65% of the CBAs and 19 disposals at half time. I can't remember what he ended up on, but he turned up, and that's a pretty good one. The last one, this isn't one that's in my team, but it's one I'm heavily tossing up this morning, is Zach Guthrie, and he's in a lot less teams, so he's only in 0.9% of teams. Started in the midfield for Geelong, got crunched in the first quarter, had his neck sort of crunched in and had to get massages and get stretched out. I'm surprised he even came back on. But if Tom Stewart plays at midfield, I think Zach Guthrie is going to play in the hole this year and play that Stewart role that we've seen the last 5-6 years. He scored 93. And the one thing that I just know was Freo came back late in the game, and we know Geelong late in the game, that's usually when Tom Stewart could have 50-point last quarters. They couldn't really chip the ball around like they do because Freo were coming hot, so they had to really man up and play defensive to just make sure they sealed the game. But if there's a game where Geelong, like they play St Kilda this week, and they're up by 50 points at three-quarter time, I could see Zach Guthrie having a 50-point quarter. So just one I'm really tossing up whether I get Perryman to Guthrie today and roll the dice on a pod. But yeah, I'm going to have to do a little bit more study on that one.
Well, break even of 63, so he only needs to score 63 this weekend to make you a little bit more cash as well. Whether there's, I guess, safer picks around that option or whatever, that remains to be seen. But yeah, not a bad option, especially if you've already got people like DeConing and stuff like that, and you need to go sideways to, Perryman, who's failed you back there or something like that. Then yeah, not a bad option. My pods of the week that I thought would be a decent option, someone like Luke Parker. I kind of wish I maybe went him over Sanders in the forward line. Not sure if I actually had the cash to do that. Let me just double check their price. But I think that he might have been a good option. What's Sanders? 660. And I think Parker is 838. So probably didn't have the cash to actually do that one. But everyone was looking for that kind of that sixth midfielder in there. And some people went rookie. Some people went with Sanders, who's quite expensive for the 72 that he put up. But yeah, that might have been a good one. The one there's one I really like kind of wish, well, I don't know if I wish with, but like I put out projections with Geordie, who was going to post them all on Twitter, of some players. And one of my tips was Lockie Cowan averaging 75 plus this season. And he's pumped out a big 80 in his first game. And everyone was talking Ollie Hollands, which was a unique for a lot of people out there. But he's kind of stepped into the halfback role, I think, that Nick Newman has left. And he's the one who's kind of picked up the most. I'm not saying he's going to score like Nick Newman, but he's kind of picked up a decent point share, I think, with Nick Newman out of the side. So Lockie Cowan always been one of my favourites right from draft year. He was only an 80 average, but I think he was, if I remember correctly, he was a medal winner in the TAC Cup back in the day, or the Coast Talent League, whatever they called. Now is one of the best players in that league before he got drafted. So yeah, one I've always been big on. Thought he might be playing a bit more defensively, but he's probably my pod of the week, given about just how much time and how much I've talked about him over the last 3 years. Pretty happy with that one.
I am interested to see how they go. I know Richmond leak a lot of points to running backs and small defenders on oppositions, and I know that Hawthorn, who they play tonight, also do the same. We saw Andy McGrath and Ridley and all those mobile defenders just go. Redmond score really well last week for Essendon against Hawthorn. So I'm thinking Oliver Hollins and Lockie Cowan could potentially ton up both of them tonight. I'm going to make that as a call. I'm going to say they're at least going to go 95 to 100 tonight. I think that'd be interesting. It's going to be wet, and I don't think the ball's going to be, there'll be a lot of behinds and a lot of having to do sideways and smaller kicks in defence rather than just bombing it down the line in the wet. So if we see a lot of chip kicking just to play it safe, there could be some really good fantasy scores for Lockie Cowan tonight.
I don't know how much you back your skills checkers, but on a wet weather night, I'm bombing it down the line every time. Anyway, let's jump into, I guess, a hot take. You got a hot take for me this week, checkers?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Will Ashcroft to go 120 plus. I think I've seen him in a lot of trade out options, and I think it's just a round one. What do they call it? A knee jerk reaction. He scored 66 on the weekend, and everyone's sort of going, I need to find some cash to get the upgrades or these players that did well that I want to get in my side. And Will Ashcroft's an easy one to just flick off with some extra cash. Last week, Brisbane. So last week, Gold Coast played West Coast. Brisbane have West Coast this week. Jared Witts broke records, 68 hit-outs and just went bonkers. And then all the Gold Coast midfielders went bonkers. We saw Miller, Rao, Anderson have 90-plus disposals. And I'm thinking Lockie Neal, Josh Dunkley and Will Ashcroft this week, 90-plus disposals. So Will Ashcroft should have a 30-disposal game if we're looking at last week's, Matt Flynn versus Omac and Darcy Ford. I feel like Brisbane midfield struggled last week. They had Heaney, they had Grundy to compete with, but this week against West Coast should be a little bit of an easier task. So if you're looking to trade now Will Ashcroft, wait one more week. He's got West Coast. They're bleeding points in the middle. So just look for Will Ashcroft to bounce back. That's my hot take. What about yourself?
First of all, 100% agree with that. I think that West Coast midfield, they gave up points last week. They're going to do it again this week. I was a little bit concerned about Ashcroft given how busy that midfield is with how many good players they've got in there. But I do think he'll put up a big score this week. I think that's a good shout. My hot take this week is, so I could actually call this on the Waiver Wire podcast I put out for members on Monday. I put out that Jack Gunston will come into the side this week and Jarth will come into the side this week. So called it on Monday. And the reasoning for that is basically Scrimshaw getting injured. And so I felt like that would mean that Sicily would have to go back and play 100% defence. So the last few weeks they've been using Sicily forward and on the wing. So I reckon they'll chuck Gunston forward to cover that, use Jarth on the wing to cover that. And Sicily plays exclusively defence. And I think the ins kind of indicate that that's going to happen on Friday night with the Hawks. So is it the Friday night or is it tonight? I can't remember. It's tonight, sorry, with the Hawks.
Tonight. But they've also got Charlie Curnow back tonight. So they're going to have someone who can lock down Harry and Charlie.
They'll have both of those because they've been playing Frost on the bench. They've got Barras and they've got Battle. So I think they'll be fine there. So I think Sicily goes back to playing that 100% kind of third call, taking marks in defence sort of thing. And I reckon he's going to put up 105 average over the next 3 weeks, 105 plus over the next 3 weeks. So that's my hot take there. If you want someone that's kind of on the down and his break-even's probably kind of high at the moment, so it might not be the best time to bring him in, but I think he's going to go on a bit of a run here with Scrimshaw out for the next 3 weeks, pushing him back into defence. What are your thoughts there?
Do they have a bye? Is that a thing? Hawks?
They do, actually. They have one in round 4, I reckon. So, but yeah, Scrimshaw will stay out after that as well. So, but yeah,
he's got 3 weeks suspension, so he's going to miss 4 weeks minimum.
Yeah. Might have been the best.
I don't mind it. I worry about tonight's game. It's going to be a little bit wet. You need Sis to take a lot of marks. Sometimes that can help, though. Sometimes someone like a Sicily can take a lot of marks in the wet because he just, is a captain and a leader and just throws his body at the ball and takes a lot of those big pack chest marks.
I think sometimes
it also means
he can be kind of wayward.
Yeah, the entry can be horror. So if the entry is horror, it can help Sicily a lot. Plus, I think Charlie's going to be a bit underdone. So, the ball could just be turned over a little bit up forward. I like that a lot. I think Sicily, no matter where he plays, is going to go okay. I just seen last week. I worry that if he goes up the ground a bit more, teams can just work out that he's a big danger and tag him out of the game. So if he's on the wing or going forward, they can just be like, you've got to stop this guy. And it's going to become...
this year.
Yeah, it's become really media heavy this year as well because people are starting to catch on to how good he actually is.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's maybe gone under the radar or because of his suspension history or injury history, whatever it is, he just hasn't. But this year, the discussion's already out in the media that he's going to be All-Australian and he's going to be the best player in the game or whatever it is. So, yeah, if he's down back, it helps his scoring, I reckon, a little bit.
All right, let's move into our trade plans for the week and then we'll wrap it up. So what are your thoughts? Who are your worst performers that you're thinking about trading out and who's coming in for them?
Well, the one who I'm just tossing up on, I'm looking at Riley Sanders out and it's been an absolute headache because I wasn't at the game. I was at the Collingwood-Port game and I didn't get to see it. So I've been watching back bits of it. And everyone's hot on Joel Frazier. Everyone's cold on Riley Sanders, and it's just looking at some of the stats and how Bevo used them. It's just typical Bevo headaches. Riley Sanders had all the CBAs in the first half, and then in the second half, he had no CBAs, went up forward. Joel Frazier had no CBAs in the first half. In the second half, pretty much took Sanders' spot in the midfield and had like 12 CBAs in the second half. Bevo just playing with their heads, playing with the magnets a lot like he does. And it's hard to work out if Sanders is actually going to lock down a midfield role. We've still got Bont to come back, still got Treloar to come back. So I'm looking at flicking off Riley Sanders because I need to make some cash to sort of upgrade on Perryman. So I'm going Sanders to Xavier Lindsay. That'd be a cash generation trade. Obviously, Lindsay's going to have a low break even. Sanders probably going to struggle to be in that 70 to 90 range, which is still a good score, but it's just not going to generate as much cash as I need. And then I'm going to go Perryman. Obviously got the bye next week, up to Max Holmes, who plays St Kilda this week, should dominate the midfield.
Just on your point about Perryman, with Sanders and Frazier, I don't know how to say it. I've heard commentators say it every different way this season and pre-season so far, but we'll work it out eventually. The thing people are talking about, people are jumping off Frazier. I know Sanders is probably a good shout to maybe jump off, given that he's not guaranteed. But there's players to come back into that side as well, so the CBAs aren't guaranteed. But with Frazier, if you look at his last 5 games, so the last 4 of last season and the first one of this season, where he's only really started playing across halfback because he was a forward for a lot of last year. He's actually averaging over 85 now, I think, from his last 5 games. So that might be something to actually just think about. Personally, I was worried about someone like Frazier going into the midfield because I think he scores better across halfback, and when he goes into midfield, he's got tougher opposition and all that sort of stuff. So I'm actually seeing that as a blessing for someone like him if he doesn't go into the midfield as much, as opposed to someone like Sanders who you want in the midfield more. So there might be some saving grace there where we see Frazier just go back to halfback, and then that does leave a spot for Sanders, but I think your concerns are warranted over the way he started, and Bevo is so unpredictable. So, yeah, that's a fair shout. For mine, I'm pretty boring this week. My philosophy, first week of trading, is just fix up whatever you missed out on. You're always going to miss a rookie. You're always going to miss a mid-pricer or whatever. So I like to get those guys in. So my first one I'm going to do is Hugo Garcia out, bring Xavier Lindsay in for the juicy break even there. Do I think that Lindsay's going to score like that every week playing on the wing? Absolutely not. But you got to play the cash game when the break evens are low, and make the money in your side and get it in. The thing I need to quiz you about, because I'm not sure about this one, I want to bring in Sam de Koning, because you look at his role and you say, Toby Conway's back training and Reece Stanley's probably a better ruckman than he is in terms of hit-outs and stuff like that. But it was kind of like they set it up like Blitzar ruck defence. They had de Koning rucking across middle, and they had Shannon Neal rucking in forward. So it was kind of like he was just sitting in the midfield as a midfielder and just going to the contest where he needed to and just playing as a midfield from there. So I think the role is actually quite nice for him, and I don't think they'll rush Conway back in given his injury history. So I think we've got 4 to 5 weeks of de Koning doing this, because I don't think they're that concerned about winning the hit-outs when they've got the other 2 guys doing their job in their parts of the ground. So my question is, do I trade out Perryman, who's got a pretty high break even this week and doesn't look like the fantasy scorer that he is, or do I trade out someone like Ash, who's got the bye this week, who's going to be guaranteed 0 for me this week? What do you think the best option is? Because Ash is averaging, 92 so far this season, and his break even's quite low. So he will make me money next week if he comes back in, but isn't obvious as 0 this week. Or do I trade out Perryman with concerns over his role? He's going to probably lose me money this week, but he's going to score for me this week.
It depends who you think is going to be a better scorer long term, because Perryman has the bye next week. So you can cop Ash's 0 this week, you can cop Perryman's 0 next week.
Yeah.
Ash, like I mentioned before, played Melbourne, and Melbourne were coming home late, and it was a tight game, and it was in the wet, and Whitfield and Ash and the halfback flanks of GWS didn't get to link up. They sort of had to pump the ball deep forward and try to get on the scoreboard to come back against Melbourne. Melbourne were up, had the lead in the last quarter, so they had to, had to get the ball down to Lockie Keefe so he can kick the match winner. So there wasn't a lot of that chip kicking. Ash scored, I think it was like 63 on the weekend. It might have been around the mid-60s. Yeah. You add in 4 little chip kicks and 4 marks in that last quarter like they normally would with Whitfield, and that's a 90 score. So I think Perryman is going to still be a good scorer. Paul can be hard to score against sometimes, and obviously Houston was back and it affected his role maybe a little bit from what he had round 0. I still think Perryman will be okay. He's not going to be scoring 50s every week like we did on the weekend. But I think Ash probably long term is the better option, and he's the pod that you've been riding all pre-season. So might as well pick your pod. This makes the game fun and interesting.
Yeah, I guess my concern is just that I'm running with a 0 in my defence. I could obviously bring someone off my bench, but I've only got the Richmond kid, what was his name?
Luke Traynor.
And then Zach Reid on the bench as well. So they're not going to be big scores for me. I know we only played best 18 this week, but I guess my philosophy would be trade Ash this week, trade Perryman up to a primo next week. So I've got Ash to DeConing for the cash grab, and then Perryman can go up to a Holmes or something like that next week when he's got the bye. I don't know. What do you think I should do? Give me your call.
I think it's an early knee jerk. So I would just roll Zach Reid or the trainer, because you can run the what do they call them? Loophole.
Yep.
Hopefully, if you can work out a few loopholes with the best 18, you can usually find a way to scrape that 30 off your field and turn it into a 60 or a 70.
Yeah.
And Luke Traynor and Zach Reid actually scored okay last week. I think they scored 60, mid-60s, both of them. Not saying they'll do that again.
62 and I think 58. Oh, no, 62 and 63, yeah.
Yeah, so if one of them does that again and you find a way to loophole that in, it's not the worst call, because Perryman only scored a 50 last week. So,
and I think the good option is as well, that gives me an option to do a vice-captain loophole if I need to as well in there too. So last week I couldn't do it with the Sam DeConing 130 odd I had on the field because I didn't have a 0 on the field. So this week I've actually got that.
Yeah, I worked out. I chose Bo Allen in the end because I had Tom DeConing rolling around as a VC on the Thursday night. So Bo Allen hopefully back from illness this week. If not, it'll be okay because it's best 18. So cop the 0.
Want to sacrifice the cash gen. That's the thing with having a full complement of 30.
Cop the 0, but I think it might work out okay in the VC loopholing ways the first few weeks, because it would probably earn me an extra 20 points last week. The having Bo Allen, which could just say Bo Allen had a pretty shit week. That's what I'm telling myself. He just scored 20.
I think Selby worked out that the 20 points is the difference between first and fifth in the overall ranking. So if you finish fifth, or if you win the car, it's you probably would have finished fifth if you didn't make this move. So
it's all right. We're winning the car. We're going all the way.
Exactly. Anyways, I think we'll wrap it up on that note this week. Thanks heaps for joining us once again. Sorry about the delay. We should be back at the usual time next week.
No trips to Hobart next week. I'll have my camera back next week. The quality will hopefully be a little bit better. And we'll be back on a Tuesday schedule. And then, and we'll have shitloads more to talk about, because, oh man, the Twitter over-analysm that I've seen this week on just one sample size of footy is crazy. I can't wait to have 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of footy to sample size stuff on, because there's a lot of experts out there telling me that so-and-so is the best player to ever exist, and he's played 80 minutes of footy, so excited to get some sample sizes going.
Correct. All right, thanks for watching. Talk to you next week.
Sounds great.